Nasty Natty has zipped up the competition so far, but that competition is about to get a little tougher.
You are Locked On Bearcats, your daily podcast on the Cincinnati Bearcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Here we go on a Monday, July 24th. Thank you so much for making Locked On Bearcats your first listen every day. It's free and available wherever you listen to podcasts, including if you watch us on YouTube. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button when you're there. Follow us to get an alert every time that we drop a new episode. My name's Alex Frank, your host each and every day here on Locked On Bearcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're going to start things off today with a little different, but it is still very, very current. Nasty Natty in the basketball tournament has literally zipped up the competition so far, including a momentous win on Saturday, 77-73 over Zip 'em Up, which was a cast of Xavier alums. The Nasty Natty also earned an 88-76 win over the Money team earlier last week. And he's been there to cover it all in Cincinnati. He's my good friend, and I hope yours too, from the front office news. That will be Neil Meyer, who joins me today, back to being a weekly guest here on Locked On Bearcats. And Neil, I want to ask you this, because for those in the Locked On Bearcats audience who don't really know about, and really any audience, but specifically for the Bearcats, for those who don't really know much about TBT, kind of tell us what it's about and why it's so significant.
Yeah, absolutely. So TBT started back in 2014. It is a tournament that has been played every summer since 2014, where you build a squad, whether it's current guys you've played with in college or guys from all across the country. You put a squad together and you're playing for $1 million. So it's a tournament of 64, single elimination, and you're playing for $1 million. So, I mean, most of these guys in this, they once played overseas, they played in the G League, some of them even played in the league. But overall, it's just a great atmosphere. It's a great event where you can come back, really get that atmosphere to play with some of the guys you played with in college, but also you're playing for $1 million. So who wouldn't want to play for $1 million? And that's a lot of money. So if you can win that $1 million prize, it pays off.
Well, when they say survive in advance, just like on Survivor, when you win $1 million. So there you go. Sounds like it's a really competitive tournament. I know it's been around for several years, and Nasty Natty has had teams in the past. But correct me if I'm wrong, this is the first time they've won a tournament game in TBT.
Yeah, they picked up their first win, 88-76 over the Money team on Friday night for their first ever win in TBT history. So that was a huge win. It was a huge momentum shift for Kashmir Wright and the Nasty Natty squad. And then they turn around and they get a big, huge win versus the Zip 'em Up squad. Jacob Evans hit an absolute dagger to zip up the Xavier crowd and really hit it there after a game that was made close. So it was a great weekend here for the Nasty Natty squad, and they're looking to come back tonight and get a huge win versus the program for autism, with the chance to go to Dayton for the Elite Eight of the TBT on the line.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's why I wanted to have you on today, Neil, because there is a game tonight, and it's against the what did you call it? It's against the program for autism. 7:00 tonight, tip-off at the Cintas Center. I know you'll be there to cover it for a TFON. So just what's it like covering these games? Like, does it have even remotely close to the same intensity as, like, let's say a crosstown shootout or a conference game? I mean, the Bearcats are now going to the Big 12, which we'll talk about later on in this show. The Big 12 schedule, or at least opponents, were released last week. Neil, is the intensity of these games, is it palpable? Is it remotely close to what you get in a regular season game? Like, kind of take us into what the atmosphere is like at these TBT games.
Yeah, the atmosphere is actually amazing for a summer classic like that. Yeah, the stadiums aren't fully sold out, but I mean, you'd still get a good decent crowd, a good showing, but you feel the environment. You know these guys are all hoopers, so they're going to come out and they're going to put on the best performance they can. And for this Nasty Natty squad, I mean, you saw it last night. You saw how all the opportunity to play against Zip 'em Up, renew that crosstown rivalry just a couple months early here in the summer. I mean, you saw the buildup before it on social media. The TBT team posted it. It started with Kevin Johnson ripping the Zip 'em Up sign off the placard, off the little banner in the gym. They ripped the placard, threw it on the ground, and said, "Leave it here. I want them to let them know we did it." And then JP McCurry walked in to shoot around a couple hours later, took the Nasty Natty sign, spiked it on the ground. And then that's the buildup. That's this rivalry here at Cincinnati versus Xavier. So it was intense yesterday. The rivalry was intense. Mark Lyons did a little bit of chirping the night before after Nasty Natty won their first game. He was doing a little bit of chirping in the tunnel. So the buildup was real. Everyone kind of knew from there on what was at stake. So the buildup was real. It was the crosstown shootout just in the summer. It wasn't a sellout, but they still had a great showing. And I mean, what more do you want for a TVT matchup? Cincinnati versus Xavier, where it's 74, I believe it was 74-73. Target score was set for 75. Troy Copain gets an opportunity to really just walk it off there with a free throw, but TBT rules, if you get fouled in the Elam ending and it's 1-1, you get a free throw and you get the ball back. So Troy Copain missed the free throw, but they got the ball back. And then Kashmir Wright drew up a play. It was, from what we asked him, it looked to be a double down screen. Try to get the ball in Jarron Cumberland or Jacob Evans' hands. And next thing you know, Jacob just hit a step back there. He crossed up Nate Johnson, I believe it was, and created that separation and just let one go from back in Clifton, it felt like, and cashed it out and walked it off. 77-73 victory for Nasty Natty over the Zip 'em Up squad.
Okay, circle your calendars. December 9th. Because if last night was any indication, or Saturday night, from what you're telling me, Neil, I can't even begin to imagine December 9th at the Cintas Center. Bearcats, Big 12, Xavier, Big East. I mean, I'm already starting to think about how crazy of an atmosphere that's going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be rocking. I mean, it's a crosstown shootout. The Bearcats know what's at stake. Always the Battle of Cincinnati. The schools are just like 3.7 miles away, if I remember right. It's a rivalry that dates back. This is going to be the 78th matchup played between these two programs. So it's going to be huge. And December 9th, it's going to be fun, but it is at Cintas. So Cintas does get pretty loud in there. I'll admit it. It'll get pretty loud. And it's a great environment for college basketball for many people who haven't experienced that crosstown shootout. It's going to be a good environment. And, man, December 9th, it's going to be rocking at Cintas. It's going to be electric. It's going to be a game to watch on all agendas across college basketball.
And a place where the Bearcats have not won since 2001. So that's something to keep an eye on. Real quick, does Jarron Cumberland still have that mentality that he, and I quote our good friend Justin Williams of The Athletic, does Jarron Cumberland still have that mentality of he's there to destroy you?
Yes. Absolutely.
Oh,
if he gets one step on you, just get out of his way. Just do it. We've seen it here in the first two rounds. I mean, if he gets a step on you and you see him bring that ball up the court and he's got that step advantage on you, just get out of the way. He's taking it to the rack, and we've seen it in the last two games. He finished with 28 in the Nasty Natties win over TMT. Finished with 24 last night. So, hey, that's as what Kashmir Wright says. When him and Jacob Evans come out and put up numbers like they have been, they've both been averaging like 24 points a game in the team's first two matchups. But when the stars come out, the superstars shine. And that's what Kashmir Wright said last night after the victory over Zip 'em Up. When the superstars come out, they take over. And that's what Jacob Evans and Jarron Cumberland have been for this Nasty Natty squad here throughout the TBT tournament so far.
You know, I remember that 2018 team, Neil, and I'm sure you do too. You've lived in Cincinnati your whole life. You're a UC alum like I am. And Evans had the game winner against Temple, and he also had a lot of other great performances. And I also remember Jarron Cumberland. In the last 8 games of that season, the last 4 games of the regular season, and then, or was it might have been more than 8, but my point being here is, down the stretch of that season, Jarron Cumberland might have been that Bearcats team's best player. I know I'm running long on this segment, but Jarron Cumberland might have been the best player on that team. And then you just think about the performances he had his final 2 seasons. 34 against South Florida, 27 against Houston and Wichita State, 33, Neil, you remember this, 33 against Houston in the championship game. You want to know a memorable moment? You might remember this, when he made a free throw early in the game against Houston in the championship game, and I called that game for Bearcats Media courtside, and he turned to the Houston marching band after he made a free throw and went like this. Shh. So yep. I'm not surprised that you're saying he still has that mentality, that he's there to destroy you.
Yeah, and we've seen it throughout the first 2 games. I know I believe it was the first matchup versus the money team. It was Jarron came down and he banged a huge 3. It was like 33 feet out roughly. It was Steph range, and he looked to the current Bearcats squad was in attendance that night, and he was looking there and he was just getting all excited. They were cheering him on, fueled the energy there, and next thing you know, he came down, hit the game winner, and just hit him with a good ice in the veins celebration to walk it off there for the Nasty Natty's first win. And it was electric. It was an electric shot.
An electric shot. How about that? All right, we're going to switch gears here, get back to football. We've got fall camp on the horizon. We are going to get to some storylines and what this team, you think, Neil, wants their identity to be. We'll do that all next here on Locked On Bearcats. Today's episode of Locked On Bearcats is brought to you by eBay Motors. For a championship team, it's all about making sure every player is a perfect fit. Just like Scott Satterfield says, players then plays. Players then plays. It's the same when it comes to your vehicle. Every part needs to fit just right. So the next time you need parts and accessories, head to eBay Motors. With eBay Guaranteed Fit, you can be sure every part you need fits right the first time around. Just add your ride to My Garage and look for the green check to know the part will fit or your money back, because just like in sports, confidence is the name of the game when you shop on eBay Motors. And with over 122 million parts to choose from, you'll be back in the game in no time. After all, it's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are guaranteed. So get the right parts, the right fit, and the right prices on ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. Thank you for making Locked On Bearcats your first listen every day. For the everyday listener, we really value the everyday listeners on this show, the ones who never miss an episode, the ones who make us their first listen every day. Coming up on tomorrow's show, I'm going to discuss why this year's upcoming Bearcats football team reminds me so much of the 2009 team. Yeah, I said 2009. Neil, remember what the Bearcats record was in 2009?
Sure do.
And you know what? While I'm at it, I still have the bobblehead to display it. You can see, if you're watching on YouTube, this Pike to Bins at what is now Acrisure Field. I still wish it was Heinz Field.
Yeah, and as you mentioned, that's a great moment, and the Bearcats will be there in week 3 of this upcoming season.
Yeah, and that game was just announced last week. Game time for that game is going to be 6:30 on the CW. So looking forward to that. I like it. I like that it's a 6:30 game. I'm not going to lie. Especially for those of us who work mornings, they can sleep all day and then get up and watch the game. And I think you told me, Neil, that you're planning to make the trip to the Steel City.
Yeah, I'll be trying to make the trip there for the front office news. So I do wish it was a little earlier afternoon game, but 6:30 would be huge. You get done, hopefully with the win over a top 25 team to kick off the season. But yeah, I do wish it was a little bit earlier in the afternoon just for sakes of travel and whatnot. But 6:30, you got a primetime kickoff there right ahead of that night game on the CW, so you won't have to fight with many other leading channels or whatnot, streaming services, to really get that game. So the CW will have that game, and it's a huge opportunity for the Bearcats on the road early in the season.
No question about that. If they win, go celebrate at Permanis Brothers and get some French fries on that sandwich while you're there. So let's talk about fall camp. It's coming up. What to you is the biggest storyline heading into Camp Higher Ground?
Yeah, so obviously the biggest storyline is, what does this offense look like from a season ago? I mean, this is an offense that lost literally its whole entire offensive line outside of Gavin Gerhardt from a season ago. And then Ben Bryant transferred to Northwestern, as we talked about on the last episode. And then you saw Tyler Scott, Trey Tucker, Josh Wiley, Charles McClellan all go to the NFL, along with Lenny Taylor's in that NFL group as well. And then you also have to think, they really revamped the wide receiver room and the offensive line within the transfer portal. And then you bring in a guy like Emory Jones. So the offense identity is what's going to be a huge storyline in fall camp, whether it's the wide receiver room, the offensive line. I mean, you look at the offensive line from recent years. This is an offensive line in 2022 that had, I believe it was 4 or 5 guys all on all conference teams. I believe everyone was named to a conference team. I might be wrong on that. It might be 4, but I'm fairly certain it was all 5. And that was an offensive line that lost Jake Renfro early in the season due to an injury. And he didn't play at all last season for the Bearcats. So you're thinking about this offensive line. How do you replace an offensive line that spent 5 years together, that not only took that program to new heights, that was a offensive line that started together in the 2020 season, which the Bearcats went to the Peach Bowl. Then they stayed together, went to a college football playoffs, and then comes back for the 2022 season. How do they handle the pressure up front heading into the Big 12? That's where my eyes are looking for in fall camp, will be at the offensive line and the wide receiver group.
I think you bring up a great point there, and I like the angle you took there, Neil, because the offensive line, for the first time in 2019, it was kind of a question mark because you lost a guy like Garrett Campbell. You lost, I'm blanking on his name, Calhoun, but I'm blanking on his first name, but they also lost. Did they have Morgan James in 2019? I'm trying to remember. But my point is this, and it goes along with what you're saying. For the first time in several years, the offensive line is a question mark. And I'll never forget when I was driving back to our house in Charleston, South Carolina, and I heard on the radio broadcast Jim Kelly say that Jake Renfro was injured. And I was like, well, there goes the whole blueprint of having at least your offensive line intact, despite the changes coming at quarterback, running back, wide receiver, etc. And I think about the offensive line and how I think the one key is, and I think this is obvious, but I'll say it anyway, if the same 5 guys who are going to start the first game end up starting 1 through 12, that's going to be so beneficial for continuity and for development. Now, I think, Neil, this offense, I still think it's going to be developmental at best. But there's one stat, and I think I've mentioned this to you, that I keep going back to. That Scott Satterfield's offenses at Louisville were the only offense over the last 4 seasons to average, 200 passing and rushing yards per game. Only team in college football. So that leads me to this. What do you think this team wants their identity to be offensively?
Yeah, obviously you mentioned it right there. Scott Satterfield's offense in recent years are averaging 200 rushing yards and 200 passing yards a game. But I mean, let's be honest, it's going to start with that running game. It's Corey Kiner is returning for his junior season. Then you have a running back in Miles Montgomery, who's a sophomore. Ethan Wright's back there. Ryan Montgomery is also returning. So the running back room is one of those rooms that really was probably the room that stuck together the most and didn't take any hits after the coaching change this offseason. So, I mean, Corey Kiner and Miles Montgomery, it's going to be a powerful back if they decide to go with the running back by committee. I know we asked about at Big 12 Media Days, and Scott Satterfield kind of alluded to if the season started right now, it'd be a little bit of a running back by committee with those two guys. He didn't specify what Montgomery it was going to be, but he did say it was going to be Kiner and Montgomery. He just didn't say which Montgomery. Obviously, there's two. But you talk about it, and Corey Kiner, this is a guy who's from the city of Cincinnati, had won Mr. Ohio, goes to LSU for the season. And if Corey Kiner didn't transfer back here ahead of last season, he was arguably slated to be the starting guy down there at LSU a season ago. And he comes back to Cincinnati. He showed huge flashes and then kind of battled some injuries here and there. But then you're looking back at it, he's in for a huge season, especially with what Scott Satterfield likes to do with the running backs. I mean, Corey Kiner is a guy who will absolutely run you over like a truck. And we've all seen that in the past. So for a guy like Corey Kiner, you're going to be happy to get those touches. So I think the running game is going to be huge in the identity for this offense, especially with the dual threat quarterback in Emory Jones and the first year in the Big 12. I really think they're going to have to find a way to establish that run game early.
The running back room is so interesting to me because they didn't really get hit with a lot of turnover in the offseason. And I think that there is this sense that they're going to be able to run the football much better than last year because of the new scheme, because they have a dual threat quarterback, which defenses are going to have to account for when it comes to Emory Jones. And Corey Kiner, as you mentioned, was going to start at LSU. That's no small role. The starting running back at LSU. Now he's with Cincinnati. Now, when I look at this team, Neil, offensively, we talk about running the football. Defensively, what is this? What do you see this team wanting to be defensively? One that gets after the quarterback, one that is fundamentally sound when it comes to tackling, one that's bend but don't break. What do you see? Because I feel like with Brian Brown, there's going to be an element of aggression to this defense. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And you look at what Brian Brown's defenses have done in recent years during his time at Louisville. Last year, they led the nation in sacks, quarterback hits, tackles for loss. Now he comes here, and he's coming to Cincinnati with a defensive line of a guy in a 6th year in Malik Vann, a 5th year, Juwan Briggs, a PFF rated All-American, first team rated All-American, and Dante Corleone. So, then you pair him up with a guy like Daniel Griziak. Yes, it's going to be hard to fill the void of a guy like Ivan Pace from a season ago. But you bring in a guy like Daniel Griziak, who finished with, I believe it was 7.5 sacks at Utah State last season. That's a huge addition. And then you drop Deshaun Pace to that star role. This team's going to get to the quarterback. And we asked Juwan Briggs about what the differences was from the defense from a season ago with Mike Tressel to what it has been this offseason with Coach Brian Brown. And Juwan Briggs said it's a complete 180, it feels like. And those guys, they love to get to the quarterback. Juwan, Malik missed basically all of the 2022 season due to injury as well. So he's returning fully healthy. Then you also have a guy like Dante Corleone. The Bearcats are going to be looking to get in the backfield, but they also are going to be fundamentally sound in the tackling aspect, as you mentioned. And that was something Scott Satterfield really alluded to at Big 12 Media Days as well, was really focusing on tackling and staying aggressive in the pass rush and the defensive schemes.
That's good stuff. I'm really looking forward because it feels like to me that this defense, for as good as it is kind of being underestimated. It's kind of being slept on from an outside perspective. If you don't know much about this Bearcats team, if you don't cover them on a daily basis like we do. So speaking of which, segment 3 on Monday, I always like to do this during the offseason. Lessons learned from the weekend in Cincinnati sports, from the Reds, from FC Cincinnati, from the Bengals, and it applies directly to the Bearcats. And one thing that I saw from the Reds in particular this weekend, I got a question for you, Neil, about that as relates to Scott Satterfield and the Bearcats, because Satterfield has a lot of experience with this. We'll do that next here on Locked On Bearcats. All right, so lessons learned from the weekend in Cincinnati sports. I'll tell you what, Neil, the Reds sweeping the Diamondbacks, it speaks really highly of where this club is going. Because to lose 6 in a row, and 4 of those to the Brewers, and then 2 tough losses to the Giants, you follow that up by splitting with the Giants and then sweeping a very good Arizona team that's similar to you. And now you're back to 9 games over 500, half a game on the first, big series tonight in Milwaukee. Neil, it really speaks about the resilience of this club.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's huge. Obviously, you come out before the All-Star break, drop, I believe it was 2 straight to Milwaukee. Then you come out and get swept by them in the first series right after the All-Star break. Then you split. And San Francisco's a very good team, too. That was the series they needed to take at least 2 from and split with. Because San Francisco's up there in the NL West right now. So, I mean, those 2 wins versus San Francisco really set the tone. And then you come back and you get a series sweep versus Arizona. And, I mean, today was huge. I mean, you start the game off with an Elly De La Cruz home run in the leadoff spot. And then the offense just continued. And it's really starting to get going. Things are starting to click again for this Reds team, the Cincinnati Reds team here in Cincinnati. And you mentioned you got a big series here against the Brewers. And this is a series, if I'm Cincinnati, they got to find a way to get this job done. Really set the tone there within the NL Central, because right now it's been a back and forth battle between these 2 teams. And this is a series that if they drop and they get swept, this is the series that they'll be looking back on towards the end of the year for sure.
And especially because they don't play the Brewers again after this week. They don't. So you're going to be scoreboard watching. You don't have the opportunity to beat them head to head, Neil. That's a great point that you bring up there. And I mean, look, you win a series against Arizona, great, but you sweep them, and let's be. I mean, that's a good Arizona team.
Yeah, that's a great Arizona team, and what Corbin Carroll is doing out there in his rookie season is phenomenal.
Yeah,
Zach Galen's having a phenomenal year for the Diamondbacks on the mound. This is a team that's really putting the pieces together, and just like the Reds, really hit that rebuild really quick.
True. I mean, I remember 2 years ago they lost 100. I think like 106 games. Arizona. So you're right. 2 teams that have really, as you said, ahead of schedule. Now, as it relates to the Bearcats, because we've seen the Reds overcome a lot of adversity this season. They've had 2 6-game losing streaks this season. And each time they had those losing streaks, they then won 5 in a row. So if the Bearcats face adversity this season, which I'm telling you all right now, they will face some adversity. Even if they somehow magically go 11-1, they're still going to lose a game if they do. And realistically, they're probably going to lose more than 1 game. Is this team, like, let's say they lose to Oklahoma and BYU. Are they built to overcome that adversity, Neil?
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that's the Big 12. I mean, we've seen it in many years. As you mentioned, you say they do drop those 2 games, but that's the Big 12. And that's something we've heard the word a lot of at Big 12 Media Days was the parity of the Big 12. Any team can go out and beat any team on any given day. So, I mean, yeah, they're going to handle some adversity, I feel like, but they're going to be sticking right there and they're going to overcome it, I feel like. This is going to be a team that's going to shock a lot of people, in my opinion, and it's going to be fun. I think the adversity aspect of them making this move to the Big 12 is huge. And you talk about it. The Big 12 season, yeah, they kick off the conference slate with Oklahoma at home. And then it's a gauntlet from there. That's the Big 12. So adversity is going to hit. But, I mean, no matter what, I think they're built for it. I really do. I definitely think they're going to shock a lot of people. I don't see them finishing 13th in the Big 12. My vote in the poll had them finishing 9th. So I definitely think they're going to shock some people here within the Big 12.
It's just interesting because I just think about there's too much talent that they're going to finish 13th. And I just think about that. Here's what I will say. And you may remember, and I'm going to kind of tease ahead to tomorrow's episode here. But remember the 2009 Bengals, Neil, you're a Bengals fan, right? They win the division that year. And that team wasn't flashy by any means. But what they were was really good defensively. They were 6th in points allowed per game. They had a very good defensive front, and they were scrappy enough on offense with Cedric Benson leading the way, God rest his soul. They were scrappy enough on offense, and they were really good in key situations. And I feel like if the Bearcats can be that, they can win 7 to 8 games. Do you agree?
Absolutely. I absolutely agree with that statement.
And it's interesting, too, because like Scott Satterfield has faced adversity in his career. I mean, you go into Appalachian State and you'd accomplish what he accomplished in getting them to Division I. And you can say, well, he beat Michigan. Don't think they didn't face adversity in that game. And you face adversity. I mean, Luke Fickell would probably tell you face adversity on every play. So there's that. There's walking into a firestorm in Louisville. And then they're 8-5 in year one. And that's after getting blown out by Notre Dame on opening night, first week of the season. And then this past year, I don't know how many people remember this. Louisville was 2-3. They finished 7-5, and they were in the top 25 playoff rankings at one point in the season. So Satterfield knows a thing or two about overcoming adversity. And I feel like that, and then you think about Emory Jones and what he's been through, people can write off the Bearcats and not really pay much attention. I don't think they're estimating quite enough the heart and culture of this program. And that's a sense, Neil, I think you got from Big 12 Media Days. Is that correct?
Yeah, that is the sense I got from Big 12 Media Days. And you mentioned Emory Jones there with the adversity he's been through. I mean, this is a guy who is a top 100 prospect, goes to Florida, gets the starting job, and then about halfway through the season loses it to a guy who's now the 4th overall pick in the NFL draft, Anthony Richardson, and then transfers to Arizona State. He's there 3 games, gets 3 games under his belt before his head coach gets fired. So, I mean, you got to think. He goes to Arizona State to be with Coach Herm Edwards. He gets fired, basically has to scrap the whole year because all the coaches he was there that recruited him were now gone so quickly. And, I mean, this was a guy, Emory Jones was up there on some draft boards before transferring out of Florida. And then even at Arizona State heading into the season, this was a guy, I believe some mock drafts had him in the top 10 at one point. And this is a guy who's coming back now. I mean, I feel like he's got the right fit, something he was looking for. And I mean, as we talked about in the past, I mean, him and Scott Satterfield have a great relationship because they were talking when they were at Louisville, and it was something that had mutual interest there. So Emory Jones is going to be poised for a huge season, in my opinion, and it's going to be exciting to watch. So the adversity for both of them is huge. And another aspect you talked about was about Coach Fickell hitting adversity throughout his career. Coach Fickell took a team that was 4-8 to the college football playoffs within a matter of just a short 4 years. Talk about that adversity.
Yeah.
During a program that, was that arguably one of the lowest points in recent years, and then flips it 180 degrees and takes them to a college football playoff playing for a national championship. So the adversity has struck at the University of Cincinnati, but in recent years, they have always overcame that adversity. Now, will it be the same this season in 2023? I guess we'll find out at the end of the year.
It's just not wait for it to find out. I mean, that's what I feel about Neil. I'm going to talk about this tomorrow. There may not be any expectations of, well, the Bearcats should win this many amount of games. But what there is there's this palpable buzz of being in the Big 12, of being in the Power 5, and you don't know what to expect, but you're so excited to finally be at the big boys table. You know where else adversity is hit? The men's basketball program. And the Bearcats are still in the midst of climbing out of that adversity. And Neil, recently, the Bearcats, or the Big 12, released their opponents for each of its 14 teams this year in the Big 12. Now, the Bearcats have their home and away opponents, and the teams they will play home and away in 2023-24. We'll spend just a few minutes on this, but they will get at home, they will get UCF, Houston, Iowa State, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, TCU, Texas, and West Virginia. They will also get West Virginia, TCU, Oklahoma, Houston, UCF on the road. On the road, they will also get Baylor, BYU, Kansas, and Texas Tech. Now, my first thought was that this is the opposite of football because your away-only games are a gauntlet. You don't get Kansas at home. I'm bummed about that. I was really hoping they would. And now then again, there's 14 teams. They'll probably get them at home next year. And, I mean, I would go to Allen Fieldhouse any day. You get Kansas and Baylor and Texas Tech on the road. I mean, those are three of your consistent Big 12 juggernauts. Now, your home schedule, you get Oklahoma State, you get Iowa State, you get Kansas State. That's great. You get West Virginia, too. But do you sense like it's kind of a rough draw for the Bearcats, Neil, with these home and away splits?
Yeah, absolutely. And, I mean, you talk about it like Kansas on the road in year one. If that was a home game, you know how Fifth Third would be rocking, but it's never easy going to Allen Fieldhouse and playing a game. Everybody knows that in all of college basketball. But then you look down and you look at these teams that they have to go on the road to and play. I mean, Oklahoma's always a good environment. TCU is always a good environment. Going to Lubbock and Texas Tech is a huge, huge environment down there. Going on the road to West Virginia, I mean, even West Virginia is going to be a good environment just due to the history with Coach Huggins, even though he's no longer at the program at West Virginia. Like, you know, there's history there. West Virginia also has DerMarr Johnson on Josh Eilert's staff, who not only played at the University of Cincinnati, but was also recently on staff with Wes Miller. And then in January, Bob Huggins called, gave him an opportunity to come back there and be an assistant coach. And DerMarr Johnson took it and is now going to be reunited with some of the guys that he once coached. So, I mean, it's going to be a huge opportunity there at West Virginia just for that reason there alone. And then you also have to think it's never easy to go on the road and play Houston. We have the history with Houston. It just seems like we can't get away from them, and we probably won't be getting away from them within recent years. And then UCF, Baylor's always a hard time to play, and then BYU. So, I mean, no matter what, those away games are gauntlets. But then you look at the teams that come home, that they'll play at home. I mean, UCF, Houston, two teams they've seen in recent years within the American. Then you have Iowa State, Kansas State, who Kansas State's coming off a fantastic season this past season. Oklahoma State, TCU, Texas, and West Virginia. Texas has always been a good program. I love what Shaka Smart's doing down there. I think he's turned that program around, and it's huge. Well, Shaka Smart's at West Virginia. He was at Texas, so my bad on that one. But that Texas team is going to come back and be huge. And I think that's a huge opportunity right there at home. So, I mean, they got a gauntlet ahead of them come the 23-24 season. But, I mean, if you saw what they've been doing in the offseason and just the work they've been putting in, it's going to be a fun and exciting time for the Bearcats heading into the Big 12.
Yeah, I was going to say with Texas, they won the Big 12 tournament last year, and they very nearly went to the Final Four. And they did all of that with an interim head coach in Rodney Terry. I'm trying to see if he is still there. I'm trying to remember.
I believe he did get the extension, so he did
good
get
for him. Yeah, he did. Good for him. He's very deserving. And I will add this. If the Big 12 is smart, they put the Bearcats Kansas game right around the Bengals Chiefs game on New Year's Eve. Get the rivalry going between the Bearcats and Kansas, just like it did with the Bengals and Chiefs.
Yeah, that would be huge. That would be crazy now that they're thinking about it.
Kansas is not far from Kansas City. I think it's about 45 minutes to an hour.
Yeah, that's not far at all.
Not that. All right, and I mean, talk about playing at Allen Fieldhouse. That's going to be a great moment for the Bearcats. That is going to do it for us today here on Locked On Bearcats. Neil Meyer of the Front Office News joining me as always. Coming up on tomorrow's show, I'm going to explain why this year's Bearcats team kind of reminds me a little bit of 2009 in a shock the world type feel And then on Wednesday, George Vogel, former sports director at WLWT News 5, my former boss, will join me. And then on Thursday, we'll hopefully be joined by Russ Heltman, my colleague at All Bearcats and Sports Illustrated. This is the last week where we are 3 days a week here on Locked On, Bearcats. But because we only dropped 2 episodes last week, we're going to do 4 this week to make up for the one we did not do last week. So that's going to be fun. Neil, enjoy TBT tonight. Nasty Natty against the Program for Autism. 7 o'clock tip. The Cintas Center. You'll be there covering it for the front office news. You can follow Neil at MeyerNeil6. And where can our folks find the front office news and their content?
Yeah, so you can find us at thefrontofficenews.com. You can also find us on Spotify at The Front Office News. Find us on YouTube, where we'll have all the exclusive interviews, one-on-ones, player press conferences, interviews, podcasts. You can find us on YouTube at Front Office News. And you can also follow Editor-in-Chief JT Smith on Twitter at JT_Smith. And you can follow him as well with the Front Office News. And we're on Instagram as well. We have not made the transition to Threads yet, but yeah, just check us out. We appreciate all the guys who come and support, and we really appreciate all the support we can get.
Yeah, it's a great product that JT has, and you're a big part of it, as is everybody there. So thank you, Neil, for coming on today. As always, we'll talk to you soon. I'm on Twitter at Frankie_Natty. Neil's on Twitter at MeyerNeil6. I'm on Instagram, AlexFrankNet_. Neil, do you have a Instagram that you use?
Yeah, it's half my last name and part of my first name. So it's MEYNE5421.
How about that? I, of course, am on email at alex3frank@gmail.com as well. If you have any questions, comments, stuff you want to see covered, hear covered on this show, don't be afraid to reach out. But thank you, as always, for making Locked On Bearcats your first listen every day. Coming up on tomorrow's show, the 2003 Bearcats, 23 Bearcats, do they equal the 2009 Bearcats plus something else that happened that year? And has me hoping that this year's Bearcats team can be like that team in 2009. Which team am I talking about? Find out tomorrow. And then we will also get to a fun topic. Neil, recently, Boomer Esiason and Chad Johnson named the latest Bengals inductees into the Bengals Ring of Honor. So who could be next for the Nippert Stadium Ring of Honor? We'll get into that on tomorrow's show. Have a great rest of your day. Thanks so much for making Locked On Bearcats your first listen every day. For Neil Meyer of the Front Office News, I'm Alex Frank for Locked On Bearcats. Have a great rest of your day.